All right. Well, I think we're all good. We should get started, huh?
Do it.
Excellent. All right. I'm gonna stop the screen share there for a minute and say hello to everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Joel. I am a senior developer educator here with ngrok, and I'm going to be kind of the main host for this office hour session and for all the future sessions. I'm joined here by two of my colleagues. I'll let them introduce themselves, but first, maybe I'll hand it off to you, Scott, because you'll kind of be my co-host through a lot of these.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. I'm excited to be here and on this new program we have here at ngrok. I'm a principal developer advocate and excited to talk with you folks as we learn about your questions and try to answer them and share some good knowledge about ngrok. So this will be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks for being here, Scott. And we've got Russ here as well. You notice that maybe that Russ is not the same as Niji, who was on our promotions, but due to some last minute ch scheduling changes, we had to, Niji wasn't able to join us, but we are very lucky to have Russ here.
Yeah, I'm Russ Savage. I'm out of San Francisco, California, and I've been a PM here for almost 3 years now. So hopefully I can help answer any questions you all have about ngrok. So excited to be here.
Excellent. Thanks so much for being here, Russ. We appreciate the last minute joining us and just kind of winging it. We know that you know a lot about the platform and how to use it, so hopefully you'll be able to help us answer some of these questions that folks have. So where I want to start we is kind of a demo that shows something that was recently released last week, agent endpoints. It's an area that is very exciting for us because it kind of presents the future of what ngrok is going to look like in the coming weeks and months as we release more of the kind of pieces of this puzzle. But agent endpoints was kind of the first most accessible piece for our teams to work on and deploy. So I want to walk through that and then also show a bit of traffic policy so that you can see like how can you shape and manipulate the traffic coming into your ngrok endpoints. And then from there, we'll just hop into some of the questions that were asked via the registration form. I got some demos for those as well. And yeah, we'll kind of go from there. And we've got a question here about just what ngrok is, and maybe my demo will help, give some context for that as well. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and get up my first demo. And of course, it wants to switch desktops on me. So what I have here is a very simple API service that I wrote. It basically just gives you back facts about desert tortoises, which I like because I have one in my backyard. And what I'm going to do is start that service up. And you can see that it's running on localhost. In another shell here, I'm going to go ahead and start the agent endpoints. So this is, will be familiar for a lot of you who have used ngrok before, but basically what I'm doing is calling the agent CLI, saying that I want to create an HTTP tunnel, and I'm looking to connect it to port 5000, which is where my API service is running locally. And the magic of agent endpoints here is this URL flag, which replaces the domain flag, kind of details that you don't maybe need to worry about too much. And I'm going to just go ahead and connect that to a domain that I've reserved and connected my domain to ngrok for this purpose. And you can see here that ngrok is forwarding my local service to this URL that I created. And I can use a curl command should have picked a shorter URL to use here. And I'm going to go ahead and ping the random route, which just gives you wonderful random facts about desert tortoises. So this is like the most fundamental version of ngrok that I think a lot of you have maybe used or are hoping to use. It's like tunneling a local service to the public internet, and that just like makes a lot of things accessible to you and opens up a lot of opportunities. And that's super exciting. The thing with agent endpoints is that we might talk about this for a few minutes after I kind of finish the demo here, but it's like I said, it opens up some new functionality right now when it comes to visibility about your endpoints. But it's also going to unlock so much more that we'll be able to talk about in the next office hours session, and in future developer roundtable sessions that Scott hosts monthly as well. But okay, so you got a basic endpoint running here. That's cool. That's great. Maybe you want to take this a step further, and you want to, you don't want to just let anybody access your endpoint for any reason at any time. You want to add some conditional rules about like who can access which routes, maybe where they're coming from, what kind of requests they're making. You want to be able to shape and manipulate that a little bit. And we now do that with traffic policy. If you're not familiar with that, traffic policy is a module. It's similar to all of our other modules that you might have used in the past, but it allows you to write expressions and evaluate the qualities of the traffic coming in and decide whether or not you want to take action on that. So let me just show you. I have a traffic policy file already written here, and I'll just kind of walk you through it really quickly.
Joel, can you increase your
Increase. That is a
the
good question.
yeah the
You want the font size
yeah,
bigger.
the font size. I was gonna say resolution. We always say resolution. That doesn't make sense, does it? Because it's like is there a way to increase like the font size real quick? Just like
yes, I have to. I have to. I have to
yeah.
update my config to be able to do that.
Okay. I didn't know it
But
was I thought it was just like a Command Shift plus sort of thing.
but
But
we're
I also
gonna
don't use Kitty.
we're
So
gonna I let's see if like let's hope and pray that.
we should have a whole session on Kitty. I'm super interested in
Yeah,
what
now
those
I don't know.
terminals.
It's not going to let me reload the config, and I
Okay.
don't want to do it without destroying all my demos here.
That's
Um,
fine. Yeah, just keep going.
so
I just thought it increase just a little bit.
I will look into that more
Okay.
concretely when I pass things off to the two of you to talk about one thing or another.
Sure.
So yeah, sorry if you can't see this, if it's little. You can try to lean in close or zoom or something. But basically,
Can you just share, sorry, can you just share that
Oh
window,
yeah,
and
the
then it'll be a
terminal
little
window.
larger?
not a bad
Yeah,
idea.
there you go. That's why we're here as a committee, right? There
There
we
we
go.
go.
That's a
Okay.
nice nice. Good one, Russ.
We have workarounds. Excellent. So yeah, basically what I'm doing here is I have, you can name your rules whatever you'd like. I have an expression here that uses this rec.url, and that's a variable that's made available to you at request time that says like this is where the request is coming to your endpoint. And I'm saying if that URL contains the route/random, which is the one that I just called with curl, we apply an action. We're applying the rate limiting action. And I'm kind of setting a really arbitrarily low value here just for the sake of the demo. But I'm saying that one person from a specific IP can query that endpoint 5 times every minute. And obviously all of these settings are, you can change all of these according to what you need. And there's we have tons of content already that we'll link to in the chat or we'll make available after the fact that shows some really cool ways you can use expressions and rate limiting and other actions to do stuff that is really quite powerful. So
Do you mind if you bring up that traffic policy really quick?
yeah,
Can I just touch on a couple more points there?
absolutely.
Yeah, so the really awesome thing about traffic about policies that are attached to endpoints. So anybody who's used ngrok before knows that it's really straightforward to add essentially capabilities to your endpoint, or if you've used edges, you can add them to specific routes. So for example, like, my API /auth is now the auth route. what traffic policy lets you do is those expressions you can actually match on any characteristic of your inbound traffic. So previously you could only match on the host port or you could match on the path. Now you can match on specific header values. You can match on specific information about the person who's accessing the endpoint. So for example, the client IP or maybe the geography of where the person is coming from. And you can create different behaviors there and you can send them to different places. So in this case, right, we're going to look for a specific I think it was header value of the incoming traffic, and then yeah, so we're looking for a path, but this could just as easily be people from the U.S. or people from, someone said they were from Pakistan, so people from Pakistan. You can send them to a different place. You could have particular information about the header. So if someone comes in with an auth parameter, they come in with already authenticated, you can perform different actions here. So really flexible. This expression, we use a language called CEL, CEL, and I think it's common expression language from Google, and so it really unlocks the ability for you to do a bunch of different things. And we also publish what we call macros, which are kind of like helper functions that let users quickly and easily access things like header values, things like cookie values, all that sort of stuff. So really awesome. Just wanted to call that out there.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Russ. The extra context is really helpful, and I think the big thing is that it's flexible and there's so many ways to be creative with it, that like you can combine these variables and macros, both macros like that the ngrok team has added, but also sort of the fundamental CEL macros to just do some really cool stuff. Like you can do timestamps, you can do dates, you can do all sorts of really interesting stuff. And yeah, we'll be producing a lot of content about it in the weeks and months to come. So, okay, so we have this traffic policy, but at the moment, ngrok doesn't know through this command that I ran before that like we want to use this traffic policy. We need a way to basically upload that YAML file to the ngrok platform so it knows what actions and expressions and everything to run against your agent endpoint. So I'm going to do that with the traffic policy file flag. And let's see, I think we can just do traffic policy YAML. And that runs, and you can see it's, using the same local host connection, forwarding to the endpoint. I see people are pinging it now. Fantastic. Hammer away. Hopefully my machine can handle all the extra traffic here. I mean, that's really like the perfect way of showing the core power of ngrok is like I have this service running locally here on my computer, and you all are getting tortoise facts as we speak. That's amazing. I'm going to show off the rate limiting capacity that we just added. Maybe somebody can like fire off enough curl commands to make it happen themselves, but I have this nice little bit of bash that will do 30 curl commands in quick succession. So you can see we're getting normal responses back, and then it flips over to the 429 response, which is you have been rate limited. There's more information that's available. It's just like with the command that I've written here, you can't see everything. But you can see that at a certain point, the ngrok platform has decided that my IP has hit this endpoint too often, and I need to wait a little bit. And we can't see it here just because other people are hitting the endpoint as well. But the great thing about rate limiting and other actions that reject or deny requests from coming through, that happens at the ngrok platform as opposed to at your service. Like all those 429s that you got, my API service wasn't responsible at all for dealing with that, for applying a rate limiting algorithm. It's all happening at the ngrok edge. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the demo of like agent endpoints through traffic policy. If people have questions about that, like we'd love to hear. Russ is very helpfully putting information into the chat. And Nina, I see you are maybe familiar with Kitty configurations. So if you see what I'm doing wrong, let me know. I thought I had that right, but it's not letting me reload the config on the fly, and I don't want to close all my wonderful Kitty windows because I have all these demos set up. But we'll get there. All right, so I'm gonna prep for one of the first questions that we had. What we did is we made on the registration form, you could ask a question ahead of time, and that's fantastic. We love that because it allows us time to create little demos or just prepare a really solid answer for you. So I'm gonna get prepped for that. Scott and Russ, if you guys want to just vamp on any questions that are being asked or want to talk about agent endpoints for a second, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I saw that something that you showed in your demo, Joel, I'm gonna kind of branch off on. So folks who are familiar with ngrok, I'm probably here. I'll share my screen here, and Sunil, I'll get to your question as well during mine. Let's go this desktop, share. All right, so what we're gonna do is, if you've ran ngrok before, you've probably run something where you say ngrok http 80, and you get a random URL, right? And that random URL changes every single time that you run ngrok. So I come back here, I run it again, I get another random URL, which works fine if you're showing something off very temporarily. But if you're trying to have something that's running more permanently, then you probably want something that's more static. Or maybe you have your own domain that you want to bring. And so you saw that Joel brought his own domain. I want to show you how we can do that really quick here. So we're going to come here, we're going to close this out, and I'm going to say, I'm going to go into my ngrok dashboard here. And I'm going to come over to my domains, and I'm going to say that we're going to have an office hours one. So I'm going to say office hours dot ngrokpaperscissors.com. That's a domain I own. I'll come there. I say yes. I'm going to use the automated TLS certificate that ngrok provides. I'm going to say continue. And that is all happy and good. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this right here, and zooms in my way. Get out of my way. All right. And then I come here, and I want to have, oh, Russ, y'all changed the UI on me. DNS target. There we
Yeah,
go.
what are you looking for?
The
there you
CNAME stuff. So yeah, I found it. Okay, so, and then this gives me the CNAME record that I can take to my registrar. So I'm gonna take this here, copy this value. I'm gonna go over to my domain registrar where I have ngrok paper scissors. Get that out of the way again. Come over to my domain stuff. I'm gonna add a record here. See all my subdomains I have going on. And we're gonna say office hours. And I'm gonna give it a CNAME record that ngrok handed over. There we go, CNAME. I hit save. And now I have that there. And I'll come back here to my dashboard. We can say check status, and I'll pray to the demo gods that it works. Yep. So that gave it enough time. So now I can use this office hours.ngrokpaperscissors.com, and I can come here and start a new tunnel. We'll do that. Okay. And we'll say ngrok http at, and then you saw Joel gave us the URL, which is the office hours.ngrokpaperscissors.com. And that gives us, that's right. And then that gives us a connection for our endpoint. Now, Sunil was asking, how do we secure that endpoint? So there's a couple ways we can do this. One is I could say, well, if I want to restrict the traffic that's coming to this endpoint, I can basically say, well, now I'm going to put OAuth in the way. And I'm going to say Google OAuth. And I'm going to say OAuth, I believe it's OAuth email. And I'm only going to allow, actually, we're going to say domain. Right? And then I'll say ngrok.com. Keep things a little more standard here. And now, did I not do that right?
It's actually OAuth hyphen allow
Allow.
hyphen domain.
Allow. There we go. And now if you try to come to this domain, I'll copy that. And I'm going to say in this one here, ngrok, paper, scissors. Ngrok. No, what did I do?
Oh, you're good. It just when
Yeah.
so the automated TLS provisioning, what we do is we reach out to Let's Encrypt service and wait for them to automatically provision the certificate and then bring it back to your domain. And in the meantime, your endpoint is protected by the standard ngrok certificate. So that's what this is saying essentially. Hey, we're still waiting on to provision your local certificate, so you're using a different certificate right now. So
But
in a
that's
few
just
minutes,
temporarily.
in a few minutes it should show up.
Great. And so then it comes here and it's going to check. I have to go through the Google sign-in process to use Google OAuth. I'm going to hit ngrok. Now it's going to kick me into an error message because I don't have anything running on port 80. But imagine that you have something actually running on port 80 and then this actually works. So you can secure that. And so you have your own custom domain that you're using that you brought, but then also you can restrict access to that endpoint using OAuth. So hopefully that was something
So
helpful there.
we support OAuth, we support OIDC, we support SAML, we support basic auth that you can use if you're just testing locally. All of those are just commands that you add to to your CLI to turn that on, and it gets turned on instantly.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Scott. It's a great demo. And there's plenty of other ways like to continue with this. I feel like I'm hammering on about traffic policy so much, but the great thing about traffic policy is that like you can use OAuth like as Scott showed, but you can do other things as well. Like you can add IP restrictions. So you can say only allow my IP, like a static IP that I trust to access an endpoint. There's so many other ways that you can protect your endpoints from all sorts of things. I even published a blog, I don't know, 2 weeks ago or so that gives you a couple options for specifically blocking search and AI bots from accessing your endpoints based on filtering their user agents or using a robots.txt file. So again, there's so many different ways that you can protect your endpoints, and we just, it's all here to give you that flexibility depending on what you're looking for. Thanks, Scott, for dropping that in the chat. Awesome. Okay. We had a question that was kind of pre-prepared from Richard, who I don't believe is actually here, but I think it's a really popular use case. So I'm going to go into it. And then we had another question from David, and they pair together well. So I'm going to cover them both kind of in the same demo. And Richard's question was specifically around using ngrok to start basically to connect and make available a web server that's running on a Raspberry Pi and make that publicly available. So luckily I have a Raspberry Pi running in a different room here in my house, and I can connect to that and show everybody how it works. And then David, on top of that, wanted to know about configuring and auto starting or running ngrok as a service so that if your Raspberry Pi or whatever device you might be using goes down for whatever reason or restarts, you will have your ngrok tunnels start back up on boots, and you don't have to worry about managing the life cycle of them so distinctly yourself. And of course, that's relevant like in production as well. Like you don't want to have to like use screen or all sorts of weird things just to make sure that your endpoint stays available. So I'll go ahead and share my screen, and we've got like the combo here, like sharing just this, but I also managed to get the font size bigger using Nina, your tip to use Command Shift Plus finally worked for me. So we're gonna have giant text here.
Nice.
So like I said, I have a Raspberry Pi running in a different room here. I use it for Pi-hole for blocking trackers and all that kind of stuff. And it comes with a web server that uses for the admin panel, basically just for that. But I can kind of commandeer that web server for this demo as well. So you can see that I have it running. I can curl that web server and it's running here. This is the sort of local IP on my network. But that's not really what we're trying to do here. We want to make this available to you all, let's say, to access. So I'm in here in my Raspberry Pi, and this use case is basically just as simple as starting a tunnel on port 80, which is where Lighty is running by default. I can start that up. And because I didn't specify a URL here, I've been given a randomized ngrok specific domain. So, you can kind of choose your, like, whether, having your own domain is important to you or not. Like in some circumstances, it might not be. And it's very easy to just use one of these. And then obviously I can curl that different endpoint, even though I'm on the local network, my request is headed off to ngrok. It gets processed within our backend, sent to my agent running on the Raspberry Pi, to Lighty, the web server, and back again. And you can see that is, it's basically just as fast as running it on localhost. So there's a super basic demo of running on a Raspberry Pi, and probably regardless of which web server you're using, you would probably still use the same ngrok HTTP 80. I think unless you configure Nginx or Caddy or something else differently than the defaults, it's probably going to be how it works, and it should just work out of the box for you. So that's great. Like, you've got your Raspberry Pi server running, but as David was looking for an answer about, like, this process here is like, it feels kind of fragile. Like I can't exit out of my SSH session without like first killing the ngrok process and then exiting. Like, how do we make this feel more permanent and more sustainable? The way to do that is that ngrok has this ngrok service command within the CLI, and that helps you kind of install and maintain the life cycle of ngrok as a service. And what you need to do in this case, though, is that you need to convert to using a configuration file, and you're basically loading that configuration file into the ngrok agent so that it knows kind of what it should be doing, because you're not able to specify that on the command line. So again, I've created a very basic YAML file here that's configuring an endpoint with a URL. And you'll need to kind of adapt this for your own use case. Again, like port 80 might be port 443. It might be something else depending on what's running on your Raspberry Pi. And then I can install these configuration files as a service. So you have ngrok service install. And what you need to do is, what I'm going to do here is pass both the defaults configuration, which is where your auth token is typically stored. And I made these files separate so that I don't kind of expose my auth token to everybody here. I don't want to have to go back immediately and roll that key and worry about what's happening. But you can specify multiple configuration files just by delineating with a comma, and the agent merges those files together to kind of create this service. And it didn't work. ngrok. Oh, I didn't specify the config flag. So make sure you put that config flag in there, and you can see it's opened these two configuration files. There's no errors. It's detecting that I'm using systemd. It merges those files, installs it, and now ngrok is running as a service. So now I can curl, I think it was just raspberry pi.joelhans.xyz. And I'm not sure what's happening there, but theoretically, that's what you're able to access the endpoint. Any questions about that piece, about like how to make these other services, whether it's on a Raspberry Pi or any sort of home lab that you might be running, making those available?
While folks are asking questions, I'll just say that's pretty rad. I haven't messed with the config files yet in my time at ngrok, and so I didn't realize you could install it as a service so that it could reboot, which would be very helpful for the web server that I'm running downstairs.
Yes,
So
exactly.
that's we've been having some issues with the box falling over. So also we live in a place where our power goes out a fair bit, and so
Mhm.
that kind of wreaks havoc when you're trying to run a home web server or a home lab. Is when if your power goes out and your internet goes out, you're toast.
Definitely. Yeah,
So, but no, that's great. I can set up a service so that it can just boot up automatically when the machine comes back.
exactly. It's like, if you're doing this, at work, you're maintaining ngrok endpoints and machines and services and all this stuff. Like the last thing you want to do is have to worry about that with, your home setup as well. Just like make it as, fault-free as possible. And that's fantastic. Sunil here has asked about how ngrok knows about your API and do you need to deploy your API on ngrok? And the answer to like let's answer, maybe I'll answer the second question first. Like, no, there is no deploying your API on ngrok. Basically, what you're doing is when you set up an agent, you can use the CLI as I have been using. You can use one of our SDKs. You can use our Kubernetes operator. You're basically configuring that form factor of ngrok's agents to say like what service should it be looking for. And those services, your API will always be running on your own infrastructure, whether that's a cloud provider, whether that's localhost. You own that piece, and you're just telling ngrok where to look for it.
As we say on our website, it's essentially ngrok is your app's front door, and then you're running your code wherever you run your code.
Exactly. We've got a question here from John. And John, I was going to also kind of look at your other question as well that you asked ahead of time here. So when you run that config, what preparation what preparation do you need to have, or does it grab it from ngrok if you've installed it? So I guess you're asking kind of like how do you configure properly like the endpoints or the tunnels that you want to have. Yeah, I mean we have like I don't believe it will kind of automatically grab any sort of information that you've already like if you're running it on the CLI and you want to convert to a configuration file, I don't believe there's any sort of intelligent function there that like converts the values, but we do have quite extensive documentation about how to write these configuration files.
I'll search for that while you keep
Yeah.
going. Yeah.
Perfect. And John had another question that he had asked initially that kind of uh, touches on pricing and pay-as-you-go plans. So, Russ, you might be like a decent person to talk about some of this stuff. But John was asking about like he has a a classroom application that's using some peer-to-peer and WebRTC protocols, and he's has students coming into this application, and there's 30 students, but since it's peer-to-peer, that the number of connections increases exponentially, like as more people join. And so I think he was a little bit concerned about like hitting limits with different plans, or like what kind of is available to people on the basic like free to pay as you go plan.
Yeah. In my experience, we don't get a lot of people hitting those restrictions or those limits in any of our plans. I think what I would say is if there is like there's no configuration changes when you move between plans, right? Like when you move from free to paid. So what I would recommend is set up your proof of concept as if as if there's no limits, and figure out where you hit them, and then yeah, just reach out, especially if it's some sort of classroom or student. Happy to help in figuring out how to best make that work. Because we're always looking to help those groups. So just reach out to the support at ngrok with what you're trying to do, and we can figure out how to help you.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, we've got I believe we've got Jen, one of our customer service or customer success folks in the background. Hopefully, one way or another, we'll make sure that you get that that handshake going. Russ, while I have you, we had another question that it's kind of a meaty one, but maybe we can start to talk about some of this stuff and frame it in a way that is at least gives people more resources to look forward to. And that was like this question was from a Ghoul, which was, what are the risks of using ngrok to send build requests to Jenkins on a private network? So obviously a kind of a implementation specific thing, but I think the core question for them is like, I have this, this infrastructure that is, we've secured, but we want to be able to access it. Like, what are the potential security risks of doing that? And then like, what can they do to mitigate or eliminate those risks?
Yeah, great question. We have a ton of customers that ton of users that leverage our platform to essentially communicate from public clouds to private build instances or private CIs, or the other way around, to be honest. And so it's a great use case for us. What we recommend people do is when they configure that. Don't have all the details about your specific environment, but let's say, for example, you need to have a cloud UI that's hosted in AWS or hosted in Azure or wherever, communicate with a build server that's in your private network. So there's a lot of different options to do that. One of them is to open up public ports in your firewall, in your enterprise, and make those available to your cloud platform. The downside is you need a lot of additional software and firewall and all of that sort of stuff to make sure that those ports are protected when they're opened on your network. So the other option is, what we recommend people do is they run ngrok as kind of like a sidecar next to wherever they're hosting their application. It doesn't have to be next to it, but that's what people usually do. Run ngrok as a sidecar, add those IP restrictions to it, or add some sort of shared secret key or some sort of authentication, such that when your cloud platform actually communicates to your local CI, it needs to authenticate, needs to provide some sort of authentication mechanism. And that can be a token, that can be a JOT token, that can be whatever you'd like. And then that traffic is authenticated, and they know that it's from your cloud platform communicating with your local build server. No other person can access that. They port scan your network and they don't get any results, that type of thing. So our opinion is that that's much safer than opening ports on your network, because ports open on your network tend to get forgotten about, tend to get lost, tend to get ignored as people come and go. So we see that a lot. We also see the other way. So if you flip that around, and you now have essentially a cloud build service that you need to get access to the machines that are actually doing the build. You can actually run ngrok, since the ngrok binary is a standalone binary. You can actually embed that into your cloud build services if you need to get SSH into the machines that are actually building your software. That's a really easy way to do it. Again, a lot of times you don't have access to the physical machine, so it's actually impossible to open any ports. But with ngrok, you can open an SSH connection into those build machines and get to the information that you need. Could be logs, could be to run additional commands, could be to debug. So we see people using that a lot. We see people using us in environments like Google Colab, where you are actually you're running notebooks in the cloud. If you need access to that local machine for whatever reason, you can use ngrok to get access there. We see people using us in GitHub Actions for doing a similar thing. Getting access to the actual machines that are running your build process for debugging, triaging, whatever you need to do. So a lot of different opportunities there.
Awesome.
Yeah. There's a couple other questions in the webinar chat. I don't know if we want to run through a few of them.
Yeah, I saw one
about
observability, and yeah, there's a couple others. We've got just a few minutes left, so yeah, let's try to tackle some of those, and
Okay.
then we'll wrap things up.
Yeah, so Sunil, you asked about how does ngrok know about the API? So right now, ngrok, when you're developing your API, you tell ngrok where your API is running. So ngrok doesn't actually host your API. You're hosting it either locally or on some cloud platform or wherever. You give ngrok the local address. A lot of times it's running somewhere on localhost with a port number, and that's how ngrok routes traffic. ngrok can route traffic to anywhere inside of your private network, but it can also route traffic anywhere inside of a cloud network that's private, inside of a Kubernetes cluster. As long as the ngrok agent is running on the same network as your API, you can route traffic to it. So, and you just set that in the configuration. I think it's called upstream URL in the latest version, or in some previous versions, it's called adder.
Yeah.
John asked about configuration. I think we talked a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, we
But
did.
yeah, the TLDR. So, and this is just an example of how I run things. So I've got an SSH service running locally. What I normally do is I will set up an edge to communicate using tunnels, and that allows me to manage all of the configuration in the cloud. And that's how you get that situation where you can manage the configuration from anywhere, but your agent is still running. So in that instance, like I can dynamically change the IP address that has access to that local host to make that more secure. So yeah, so essentially what you have is an always on agent running inside of your private network. And then if it's connected to an edge, you're able to then manipulate that configuration in the edge. Rihan asks in terms of observability, ngrok has a ton of different options for observability. I can touch on a couple. One of them that's probably the easiest to get your hands on is what we call Traffic Inspector in the dashboard. So if I log into my ngrok account and jump in there, I'm happy to share my screen here. This is my ngrok account. If I jump over to observability, I have Traffic Inspector configured. And this has actually information about all of the traffic going through my ngrok account. This is turned on by default for everybody to collect information about your HTTP endpoints. You can see that a lot of people are some people are trying to access kind of strange things. But if I look at, for example, one of these, let's look at this one. Gives me the request URL, gives me a summary of everything. By default, we don't capture all of the information about your request, but we just capture the metadata. But you can enable full capture, which means that we'll actually capture the raw requests coming in and out of your endpoint. This is really useful for debugging and trying to figure out what's going on. You can see what's being sent. This is a 301, so it's not super interesting. Maybe a 200 will actually give you the body that's being sent back, right? So you can then replay these requests if you're developing something like webhooks or using Twilio to send phone calls. You don't have to make a phone call every time you want to debug your endpoint. You can just use the replay functionality. So that's everything. That's great. It's a cloud viewer, cloud traffic inspector. If you're an enterprise and you are setting up kind of logging to some of your enterprise platforms like CloudWatch or maybe Datadog or anything like that, we do have a full eventing system that allows you to export your events that happen in ngrok out to those systems. And those include audit events, which are things that happen in the ngrok dashboard, but it also includes HTTP requests as well. These will get posted as JSON blobs to whatever endpoint you'd like, and you can configure. I've got CloudWatch, but we also have Kinesis, Datadog, Azure Logs, and if there's something that you need that we don't have, you can always request it. We can take a look and see how to add it. So you can configure those event destinations and ship those logs outside of the ngrok platform if you'd like. And then the third and final way to get some observability to your endpoint is to actually run the local traffic inspector. I have let's see if I've got this set up. this one. So your local traffic inspector is usually located at localhost 4040, if you see here. If I get some traffic to my endpoints, you can see that comes in. This is what people are used to. This is just in your local agent. It's just available in your local machine. It doesn't have a lot of the capability, or it's not available to anyone in your account or anywhere in the world. So useful if you just want to get some quick debugging done on that endpoint. So
Yeah, amazing.
yeah, those are the big observability pieces.
Yeah, and again, it's like it all comes down to offering multiple different routes. It's like the different form factors of the agent itself. Like you can mix and match these depending on like your unique use case or just like how do you like to operate? Like are like it's all kind of dependent on you, and they all provide a lot of the same functionality. So there's just many ways to slice and dice kind of the same end result. Links, and if we didn't answer your question live, we'll get in touch. We'll get you kind of the information that you need. And yeah, please register for next month's office hours as well. We'll be doing some different new things. We're talking about new products that are getting released in the next couple of weeks, and it's going to be fantastic. So thanks to you all for joining. Thanks to Scott and Russ for hanging out and answering some questions very handedly. And it's been fantastic. Thanks to you, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.